Welcome to week 7 here at MPAI 600 here at Georgetown University. Just announcements. I went ahead and released the final module in case you're like me and you've got a lot of time on your hands over Thanksgiving. So paper 3 and the final, and I extended the day. I know on the syllabus I said the 5th it was due, but I'm going to just make it the 10th. So you have plenty of time and plenty of time to do it, plenty of time to think through it. Next week is a little bit of a light week with some optional information on AI. So you've got plenty of time to take care of it the next couple of weeks. So I don't expect any issues. So paper 2, again, everyone should have it back. I think everyone did really good on it. Good presentations, good impactful visual presentations. So that was great on all three groups. For those of you writing, again, most of you did pretty good job. I just also want to say that I write my comments in line, so sometimes it doesn't show up on iPhones and iPads, but that's where I make my majority of the corrections in the papers. So just read those. Don't take them like I'm insulting the baby. Those are kind of my suggestions going forward. But most people, again, did fine. Just a couple issues. Again, passive voice. I don't mean to sound like your 8th grade English teacher, but I think people think they know what passive voice is, but they don't. And the boy kicked the ball is an active sentence. Subject, verb, direct object. The ball was kicked by the boy is a passive sentence. Object, verb, subject. And I say that because people think they know what passive voice is, but they don't. And this is what passive voice is. If you keep writing like this, and I have to read an entire, 1,500, 2,000 words, the sentence gets very hard to read. So that's why we try and keep everything active. So now you know what active is. The other thing is you've got to be specific. If you are going to say that Moshe Dayan suffered from confirmation bias or or the Israeli cabinet suffered from groupthink, you got to be specific. Pretend you are accusing me. Pretend I'm Moshe Dayan and you're accusing me of that. If you are going to do that, just like any accusation, you want to be as specific and as focused as possible. And you also want to say, if we use the Yom Kippur War example, where decisions could have been made. If you think on October 5th, decision to mobilize could have been made, you got to say that. If it's October 2nd, well, that's a little bit harder because war wasn't imminent. But what could have been done on October 2nd? So just keep that in mind as we're going through this. And again, as any of these case studies, we did Capitol Hill a couple of weeks ago. Imagine you are accusing the leadership of the Capitol Hill, and he's on the witness stand, and you're accusing him of groupthink or failure or any of those aspects. He's going to come back at you and say, "Okay, what's specific? Tell me what specific it is." So imagine you're in that scenario. Again, specificity is key. I also say the decisive variable. A lot of you didn't do this, and I'm expecting it in your future papers. Is okay. What was the decisive variable? You could say that there's 5, 10 things wrong with the Yom Kippur War, if we want to use that example. Okay, explain to me, but I think the primary failure was in groupthink, or the primary failure was in the traditional school of intelligence failure. Say that up front so I understand that. Back it up with evidence. Use those other schools or other issues to talk about, okay, there was some deception, there was some collection failures, but it didn't lead to the primary failure, which was groupthink or what have you. So please bring those up. Focus your papers a little bit more. And then again, I mentioned this already, reasonable decision at a time. What was a reasonable thing that could have been done? And we're going to see that over and over again, whether we're talking about the October 7th Israeli attack or any of these cyber hacks that were happening. It's easy to say all these indicators were out there after the fact, but based on the indicators beforehand, what could have been done that wouldn't have been so disruptive and so expensive that it would have been difficult to implement. So, previous week, actually going back to week 5, lone wolves. If you're going to talk about this, I should have mentioned this last week. You have to tell me the gap. I call it addressing the gap. Guy is on the radar of law enforcement because of whatever issues, open source intelligence, previous incidents, etc. But there's not enough to arrest or detain him. And again, many of those lone wolves that we've seen, whether it's on Capitol Hill, whether it's the Islamic extremists, they were on the radar of law enforcement, but we couldn't detain or arrest them, and they could still buy a gun, and they could still do their nefarious act. How do we close that gap? That's something I want you to think about going forward. So CompStat. Many of you wrote about this. Many of you thought it was the decisive factor. The benefit is that it was a focusing factor for police authorities. It was data-driven. It presumably focused accountability. But, as I mentioned, altered reports. If there's anything where your pay is tied to it, whether it's teachers or anything, people will fudge the numbers in one way or another. This happens all the time. If teachers are paid based on standardized test scores, well, they will make sure that the bad students aren't in their class, so that boosts their scores up. That's been a problem with CompStat. And then finally, if you listen to Rudy Giuliani, you listen to any of the CompStat boosters, they say that was the reason that crime declined throughout the 80s and 90s and 2000s. But there's been other factors. A booming economy, demographics, the baby boomers have aged out, better social care in our cities, more investments in social care, abortion. Yes, I don't want to get pro-life, pro-choice here, but some have argued that the abortion rate, that when abortion became legal, the unwanted babies who would later become criminals were aborted. Again, that's one argument. The decrease in lead have led to a decrease in crime. There's many, many other factors that led to this massive decrease in crime. And then, as I want you to think about, is why have we seen an increase in crime? So that the graph went down for 30 years, and in the last 3 years it went up. Why? Is it the after effects of COVID? Is it some of the reforms that were placed in after 2020? That's what I want you to think through and decide, not just for the final assignment, but as people who hopefully are interested in this issue. And then we talked about CCTV forensics. I should add AI to that. A lot of you saw that in the Boston Marathon. I will say that AI and imagery and CCTV has gone leaps and bounds in the 7 years or 8 years since that documentary came out. Many of you noted in the Capitol Hill case that the Clearview app, which is used as a kind of a facial recognition, was able to identify several of the January 6th perpetrators. So, how applicable is this? Or these are great things to use in these high-profile attacks, but how applicable is this for normal crime, day-to-day crime, day-to-day actions? And how can AI be better integrated for that? And again, I'll let you decide. So week 7, business intel. There's always a handful of people in this class who are on the business intel track. And I think even if you're not, it's kind of important that you get some of these lessons. So you have the Dr. Gilad interview. And then the one thing to think about, just like as I mentioned, decisive variables. What are businesses that operate in the same space and one succeeds and one doesn't? Why is Best Buy still around but Circuit City is not? How come CVS dominated while Rite Aid and Walgreens did not? So why did certain businesses succeed? How did they respond to the e-commerce age while others failed? So think about that as you're going through his interview. And then finally, any applications in the national security space. So if there's any questions or issues, let me know. Again, the final has been released, and I look forward to this week's discussion. And have a happy Thanksgiving, by the way, for those of you who are who are celebrating it or are traveling this weekend as well. I'll see you guys next week.